time was sent to me by a follower, and it actually involves a very popular creator on this app. They actually have millions of followers. Let's get into it. So this girl first started talking to this creator when she DM'd him, and he actually replied. She thought he was really cute, he thought she was really cute, and they exchanged numbers. Ended up meeting up at Playlist, and he invited her to chill in his Airbnb. Well, things got a little bit freaky deaky in that Airbnb. You know, they was fucking. Afterwards, they just kind of chilled. They were laid up talking about life, you know, all that deep shit. And eventually he told her that she had to leave because his boys were coming through or whatever. They just wanted to chill and talk about boy stuff. But before she left, he told her that he loved her and he wanted to be with her. What the fuck is going on here? Let me fix that real quick. Okay, we back. So she left and went to tell her friends what just happened. Hours had passed and she noticed that he wasn't really posting on his story anymore. And he usually posts a lot. While her friend opened Snapchat, noticed that he actually did post. He posted hours ago. And he was with another girl. Part two of the TikToker Storytime. I forgot to mention that this TikToker actually took her virginity. Her first time was in the Airbnb. So yeah, she noticed that he blocked her from watching his story because her friend could see his story, but she couldn't. And clearly he did not want her to see that he's laid up with another girl in that same Airbnb that they were just fucking. Anyway, so she obviously texted him and was like, what the fuck is this? She threatened to expose him and everything. And he replied saying, well, if you expose me, I'm gonna expose you. She said, what do you have against me? And he replied with, I know you have a boyfriend. And she did have a boyfriend. So she said, oop. And he proceeded to tell her that he only wanted to use her for pussy while he was at Playlist.
Scary story time about how my stalker of 5 years ended up being somebody very close to me. And they also essayed me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it's sent me on Instagram. I'm now in my late 30s, married and pregnant. This all started happening when I graduated from college. My senior year of college was super traumatizing. I started receiving threatening, scary messages on Facebook. I told the dean of the school and my teachers and they tried to help me but couldn't find the person. In the messages, they would say that if they ever saw me walking by myself that I needed to be careful and that they would hurt me if they ever saw me with other men. This made me become isolated. I was afraid to go anywhere but class. When my parents found out, they insisted I move back home but finish college. After I moved back home, everything calmed down. I stopped getting the messages and it was an instant relief. While I was in college, I had made several friends. They all worried about me and constantly looked after me. The boys in my friend group would walk me to and from class. Anytime I went to the library or run errands, my girlfriends would come with me. So after I moved back home, they would all come to visit me. My parents were super grateful to them for taking care of me and giving me their time. After finally graduating college, I thought the nightmare was over. But it was far from over. Around 2012, I decided to open an Instagram account. This is when the threatening messages started up again. They would leave comments under my pictures saying that they were watching me. This person was threatening to kidnap me in messages. They threatened to slash my tires, and they even threatened to hurt my parents if I ever decided to date anyone. When I showed my parents the messages, they decided to hire a private detective. After investigating for 2 months, they basically found nothing. All they could say was that the person who owned the account lived in the US. A few weeks after that, I found a note on my windshield. When I opened the note, it had really graphic drawings on it, and on the other side there was a poem written for me. The poem talked about how beautiful I was and how beautiful I would look on my wedding day. At the end of the poem, it was signed by someone named Paul. The handwriting was really specific. I decided to give it to the personal investigator to see if he could find anything out. But again, nothing came of it. Once again, I isolated myself from the outside world. My parents would bring me home food. I was even able to get a job working from home. One day while I was home alone, I noticed an open window in the kitchen. But as I got closer, I could see a man's hand resting on the windowsill. Part 2 is up. Scary story time about how my stalker of 5 years turned out to be somebody very close to me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, but send me on Instagram. When I see the open window, I try not to freak out, but that's when I spot a man's hand resting on the windowsill. It's as if he was trying to climb in. I screamed so loud and pressed the panic button on our alarm. The panic button would instantly inform my parents that I was in danger. It would also let the cops know that I was in danger. I could see the man's head by the window, so I told him that the cops were already on their way. He then slammed the window shut and ran away. When the cops came, they could see that he had cut the wire to the window so the alarm wouldn't sound. The cops tried to get fingerprints from the window but couldn't get any. I told them that I'd had a stalker and that I was sure it was them. That's when the cops told me that there was nothing they can do because this person didn't actually hurt me. After that, we installed cameras around the perimeter of the house. I started going shooting to learn how to use a weapon, and I even started training in kickboxing. Everything calmed down for the next year. I was finally able to feel normal and safe in my own home. This is when I decided to have a social life again. I started going out with friends and even went on a few dates. On one occasion, my friends and I all went to a party. Unfortunately, I got pretty wasted. It was the first time I ever felt safe at a party and was actually having fun. I passed out on a bed, and when I woke up, my shirt was open. I told one of my friends, but we couldn't be sure what had actually happened. I didn't feel any pain, but I definitely knew someone had opened my shirt. My group of friends took me home and I tried to just forget about it. But literally the following day, I get a message again on Instagram, and it's from the same exact person. Even though I had blocked them a million times, they kept making accounts to get in contact with me. But this time they told me that they had so much fun with me last night. And that's when I came to the realization. The person who opened my shirt last night was the same person sending the messages. I mean, how could they know that any of this happened? Then he sent me the scariest picture. It was me at the party, passed out on my bed. Part 3 is up. Story time about how my stalker of 5 years turned out to be somebody very close to me. It's not my story time, send me on Instagram. After they sent me the picture of me passed out on the bed with my shirt open, I realized that I must have known this person and that they had been hiding underneath my nose the entire time. When I asked my friends if they saw anything weird at the party, they all said no, and there was no way to find out where the picture came from. After I blocked the person once again, I didn't get messages for a few months. During that time, 2 of my friends got married. They had been boyfriend and girlfriend throughout all our time in college, and they were the ones that would take care of me along with our other friends. I was one of the bridesmaids and it was actually really fun. I was able to get my mind off of things while I helped plan the wedding. I decided to bring a cute notebook and have everyone sign it that day. At the end of the day, I would give it to the bride and the groom. After the wedding, we all went to the reception. That's when I passed the notebook around and had everyone sign it and leave a note. I also gave it to the bride to sign and the groom. Before I gave it to them at the end of the night, I decided to look through the pages and see what everyone wrote. When I finally got to the last pages, I checked the groom's signature, and it looked almost exactly the same as the one from the poem all those years ago. My stomach dropped and I knew instantly that it was him. It made so much sense. He was always around during college. He knew my schedule really well because he and the other guys would walk me to and from class. He also knew the safety measures my family and I took. I felt extremely violated. I considered him one of my best friends who had my best interest. And this whole time, he was the one stalking me for years. But I had to do something before they left on their honeymoon that night. I quickly ran home and grabbed the note to compare the signatures. When I got back to the wedding, I showed the bride both the signatures. She was shocked because they were exactly the same. We both confronted him, but he denied it. My best friend got the marriage annulled. He still denies everything. Our friend group doesn't talk to him, and he even moved a state away. But since then, I haven't gotten any messages and it's been years now. We all know it's him, but he doesn't admit it. I'm not sure how to prove that he was a stalker and possibly essayed me. What should I do?
Story time on how I catfished my boyfriend to see if he would cheat on me. So around the time I had to be like 15, 16, and my boyfriend, he was probably like 17 because he was about 2 years older than me. Everything in our relationship seemed fine, but he was very secretive. For one, he'd never let me touch his phone. He would always make sure anytime he put his phone down, the screen was face downward, or he'd put it in his pocket or just hide it. Anytime I asked to use his phone, maybe to call someone, he'd be like, no. I knew that there was something going on that he wasn't telling me, so I created a fake Snapchat account. I found pictures of this really pretty girl on Instagram, and I used all her pictures. And I'd post stories here and there, and then I decided to reach out to him. And he literally responded in like 5 minutes. I said, hey, do you have a girlfriend? And you're not going to believe his response. Come back for part 2 on how I catfished my boyfriend to see if he would cheat on me. So like I said, I reached out to him and he responded immediately. I asked him, hey, do you got a girlfriend? And he responded right now that he's just talking to people. But he didn't clarify inside of any of the messages that he had a girl. Then I started thinking maybe he thinks that our relationship is like still in talking stage. So I didn't get too mad until I asked him if he wanted to go out. Like go out on a date. He asked me where I would like the date. And I told him I'd like to meet him at a movie theater. And like for a good week, we're sitting there flirting and we're planning out our date. Now the whole time of us planning out the date, when the day came, I didn't really expect to see him. But when I walked up to the corner of the movie theater, he was standing outside. Come back for part 3. Part 3 on how I catfished my boyfriend to see if he would cheat on me. So I peeked beside the movie theater and I see him standing outside. I was seriously heartbroken that he was going to meet up with the catfish. And I had him sitting there waiting. I was texting him through Snapchat telling him, oh, I'm a bit late. And I literally had him sitting there for 2 hours. Also, during this whole process of him waiting, also went ahead and got food and came back. After a couple minutes, he was like he was just going to leave. By then, I had popped up at the movie theater and asked him, what are you doing here? And he responded, oh, I just got done seeing a movie. I was like, why didn't you tell me you went to the movie theaters? Maybe I could have came with you. Then he was like, no, I just wanted to go by myself. Then I pulled up my phone, showed him a picture of the girl I was catfishing, and asked him, was this your date? Then he pretended to not know who that was, and then I showed him our messages. When he found out it was me the whole time, he got mad at me and broke.
Story time of how I found out that my mom was actually my older sister. My older sister never really liked me as a child. We were never close. I never knew why, but I was guessing it was because of the 10-year age gap. But I'm pretty sure she hated me because she couldn't even look me in the eye. I cannot make this up. She would not look me in the eye. But she never really talked to my parents either. She kind of just kept to herself all the time. Sometimes I have vivid memories of when we were younger and she would always be arguing with my parents about something, and I always thought it had something to do with me. Well, I was right. It had everything to do with me because eventually my sister turned 18 and she moved out. For 2 years, I didn't talk to her at all. I honestly don't even think I had her number saved, and I'm pretty sure that she didn't have mine. Well, 2 years later, and I was 10 at the time, she reached out to me via social media. I'm not sure how she found my Instagram name, but it was just my name, so she probably just typed that in and found me. She DM'd me and told me that she wanted to talk about something very important and that she would like to talk over the phone. So we exchanged numbers and we called that same night. And she told me that when she was younger, my dad had taken advantage of her and gotten her pregnant and had me. This is part 2 of how I found out that my mom was actually my older sister. So like I said, my older sister had reached out to me via social media and told me that she was actually my mother. And so after we got off the phone that same night, I lost it at dinner and I went off on my parents and I screamed at them. And I told them that I would go to the police and tell them everything and I would tell them the truth unless they just let me live with my older sister. And they tried to explain themselves, and their reasoning was that they wanted to keep the family together because of their traditional values. And it would have just made their lives a lot harder going through all the court proceedings, so they just kept the family together. And so they clearly didn't want me to go into the police, so they said that I could go live with my older sister. So she came to get me, but she lived in a different state, so it kind of took a while. I still had to stay in the house for like a week or so before she came, but I packed all my stuff and I was ready to go. And when we went back to where she lived, we immediately called the police and told them everything. Fast forward a little bit, they did some DNA testing. My sister's DNA matched as my biological mother's, and then my dad was my biological father, and they saw how the ages just didn't match properly, so they took my father to jail.
How I escaped human trafficking. So one day I went to the mall with 2 of my best friends, Mackenzie and Dylan, and my sister Judy. At the time, we were 14, 15, and we were getting prepared for high school, so we were looking for the latest outfits. In the middle of us shopping, there was an older woman that came up to us and said that we looked really pretty. Her name was Miss Dream because she made dreams come true. Well, that's what she told us at least. Miss Dream said that she was a photographer for Vogue, and she showed us pictures of her and Tyra Banks. At that time, I was really into that show, America's Next Top Model, and I loved Tyra. She asked that once we got done shopping, if we could go to the back of the mall and take photos. She said she was thinking of getting us on a magazine. We were so hyped that we literally left that moment to take the photos. She starts taking pictures of us, and then she gets Judy by herself. While taking pictures, 6 guys walked up. They picked up my best friends, and when I saw this, I yelled at Judy and told her to run. I ran for maybe 15 seconds before I was caught too, and everything went black. Come back for part 2. Part 2 on how I escaped human trafficking. So there was 6 guys that walked up to us and he picked up my 2 best friends. Both me and my sister tried to run, but before I tried to get away, everything turned black. When I woke up, I don't know how much time went by, but I think we're all like on a pickup truck. My friends and Judy were all asleep, and there were a few other girls piled up on each other. I got up and tried to wake them up. Judy woke up and asked where we were, and I told her I didn't know. Judy quickly woke up Mackenzie. When Mackenzie sat up, she said she didn't feel well. I asked her what was wrong, and she literally throws up on me. And that had to be the most disgusting day because it smelled so bad. But at that moment, I wasn't upset because we didn't know where we were. When Judy tried to wake up Dylan, she wouldn't get up. Judy shook her probably 50 times and she wouldn't wake up. Then she looks at me, bends down, and says that she's not breathing. And I tell her, no, she's okay. She's right there. Judy starts crying and says, no, she's not breathing. After this, it gets really gruesome. I know you guys know that, so you can swipe up before the next part. Come back for part 3.
Storytime about how my crazy sister tried to steal my husband and my child while I was in the army. My sister and I have always been competitive our entire lives. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it's sending me on Instagram. Her and I actually didn't grow up together. We don't have the same mother. We actually met when we were teenagers, which is not a good time to meet your sister because you're already very insecure at that time. She was always a little bit insecure about her looks, and it got a lot worse when she met me. She was always comparing herself to me and asking my dad which one of us he thought was prettier. My dad, of course, would get really upset and tell her not to be like that, but I could tell that she was always judging me. Sometimes she would make fun of the way I dressed, and if I ever wore a tank top or a crop top, she would call me McChubby. Mind you, I am not chubby at all, and even if I was, it's still so wrong to call someone that. Fast forward 10 years later, I married the man of my dreams. We have a really good relationship and a 1-year-old. I joined the army straight out of high school, and I really love it. We finally got pregnant after 3 years of trying. I was told I was going to be stationed away for 2 months. My husband luckily has a job where he can work from home, and my mother lives really close to us, so I knew I was leaving the baby in good hands. My husband luckily supports me in everything I want to do, so he didn't have a problem with this. I would see my sister from time to time, but we never really hung out or anything, and she never really made an effort to meet our baby either. Last I'd heard, she'd been in a really bad relationship. Apparently, she even had to get a restraining order, and she had to move back home to live with my dad. When I finally ended up going overseas, my husband and I would Zoom every single day. This is when things took a dark turn. My husband told me that my sister came by one day to visit, and that she was full on flirting with him, telling him how good looking he is. Part 2 is up. Part 2 of how my sister tried to steal away my husband and my baby when I was stationed away. My husband told me that she came over and started flirting with him. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it's sending me on Instagram. He asked me what he should do, and I told him to just act like normal. A few days later, my husband tells me that my sister comes over with a tray of lasagna, which she knows is his favorite dish. And here's the worst part. She brought a thong bikini and sat by the pool for hours. Apparently, she wanted to get a tan. Then she asked him if they could watch a movie together, but my husband made up an excuse saying that he had to get back on his laptop for work. He even took a video of her while she was lounging in the pool, and we both laughed at it. A few days after that, he tells me she comes over crying. Apparently, some guy wouldn't leave her alone, so she asked him if she could sleep over because she didn't feel safe. She decided to walk around the house in her underwear and an oversized t-shirt. But here's what really got to me. Apparently, she was making an effort to get to know the baby, so she would go out of her way to feed him and play with him. And out of nowhere, the baby calls her mama. She never made an effort to see the baby when I was there, so why was she making an effort now? Then my sister sent me a picture of my husband and the baby asleep on the couch. And she sends me another message saying, "Your husband is so beautiful." Part 3 of how my sister tried to steal away my husband and my baby when I was stationed away. After she sent me the picture of my baby and my husband sleeping on the couch, I asked her what she was doing there. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it's sending me on Instagram. Then she had the audacity to tell me that she just wanted to help my husband out. I told her that he didn't need any help and that she could leave the house. That's when she asked me if I was insecure about her being around my husband since she's so attractive. As soon as she said that, I tried calling her, but she wouldn't answer. Then she decided to ignore my phone calls and messages for 2 days. So I called my husband and told him what she said. The first thing he did was reassure me and told me that I had nothing to worry about and that he would tell her to leave himself. I didn't want her to start any drama in front of the baby, so I told my husband to just let her stay another night. Instead, I called my dear dad, and I told him everything that she was doing. I even told my dad that he needed to go pick her up right away. My dad didn't even question me, he just went to get her. He knew exactly what she was like. 30 minutes later, I get a phone call from my husband laughing his head off. He tells me my dad came into the house and told her that she needed to leave with him. When she refused, my dad simply grabbed her by the arm and dragged her out of the house. And on the way out, he could hear my dad asking her what she thought she was doing. He even told her to stop walking around in her underwear around my husband. I only wish I could have seen it myself. But it doesn't end there. My sister decided to sneak out of my dad's house and back to mine. And this time she wore lingerie underneath a coat. When he opens the door, she takes off the coat, revealing the lingerie. My husband politely asked her to leave, but she said she knew he wanted her. Then he just shut the door in her face. I got home a few weeks after that, and I confronted my sister. She told me that I'm a bad wife for leaving my husband and my child, and that eventually he's gonna end up cheating on me. She denies having come to the house with the lingerie on. How should I handle the situation? Should I tell my dad or just let it go?
Am I wrong for breaking up my best friend's relationship with her boyfriend? Some people may say it was petty, but I think it was justice. So my best friend at the time, which we're going to call Coco, had a boyfriend, and we're going to call him Nick. They met in high school their junior year, and they were together for about 2 years. Nick was seriously in love with Coco. He would literally do everything for her. Honestly, Nick was like her little puppet. Honestly, throughout the relationship, I felt as though Coco really didn't respect Nick. I mean, the things that he did for her, I wish a man would do for me. And I just really felt like she didn't really appreciate him. If I was in a relationship with Nick, the relationship would have been mutual. I seriously believe that Nick deserved better because Coco wouldn't do anything. She literally added no value to the relationship, but Nick, he would buy her things, took her shopping, went on dates, went on trips, and Coco had nothing to show for it. So I made a plan to steal her man. And in the next part, I'll tell you exactly why I decided to make that choice. Part 2 on why I decided to steal my best friend's man. So, like I said, the relationship between Coco and Nick wasn't mutual. Coco seriously did not deserve him. In the process of their entire relationship, Coco was cheating on Nick. And, as a best friend, I tried to keep it cordial, but I just didn't like how Nick was getting treated, especially with all the things that he was doing for her. And you won't even believe the person that she was cheating on Nick with. My crush. And she knew that was my crush. She tried to hide the fact that she was talking to him, but I ended up finding out through mutual friends. I never confronted Coco about it because I just wanted to see if she would be honest with me, but for weeks she never did. So one day I decided to go to Nick's house, and I practically told him what it was. At first he didn't believe me, but then once he realized me, out of all people, would come to him about the situation, he understood and felt heartbroken. So we created a plan to hurt Coco. Come back for part 3. Part 3 on why I decided to steal my best friend's man. So, like I said, I went to his house and told him that Coco was cheating on him. And all necessary, I really don't know what Coco was doing with my crush, but I heard from other people that she was talking to him. And honestly, that was enough information for me. And we decided to plan a romantic sneaky link and invite her an hour later. In the process of us doing this, I didn't expect anything to happen, but it did. And I don't know if he expected anything to happen that night, but he practically ended up cheating on Coco with me. Later that night, when she finally arrived, Nick told her she actually needed to go home and that he was busy doing something, even though he invited her to come over. She felt something was off, so she ran upstairs to his bedroom, which was where I was. When she saw me, she yanked me by my hair and pulled me out of the bed. And the rest was history. I ended up finding out 2 weeks later after that incident, the only reason why she was talking to my crush was to get him with me.
Imagine going on a cruise with your family only to end up on the FBI's most wanted missing persons list. This was the fate of a young girl named Amy Lynn Bradley when she went on a holiday family vacation. Amy had just graduated and boarded the Royal Caribbean's Rhapsody of the Seas cruise with her parents and her brother Brad in March of 1998. The family was having a great time together, enjoying all the ship's amenities, and Amy even became friends with the ship's band, the Blue Orchid. On the night of March 23rd, Amy and her brother partied in the ship's club. Amy danced and chatted with the bass player, Yellow, aka Alistair Douglas. Around 1 a.m., the siblings called it a night and returned to their family's cabin together. This would be the last time that Brad ever saw his sister. A few hours later, at 5:30 in the morning, Ron Bradley, Amy's father, saw her on the deck of their family's stateroom lounging peacefully. All seemed well, but 30 minutes later, when he looked again, Amy had vanished. Ron assumed Amy went back to sleep in her bedroom, but when he checked, she wasn't there either. Ron went and checked the ship's common areas, but couldn't find Amy, and the family started to worry. They begged the cruise ship staff to cancel docking at Curacao, but were ignored. Both 2,400 passengers and 765 crew members were allowed off the ship. As the Bradley family continued to desperately search for Amy, the ship's staff remained unhelpful. They didn't want to announce her disappearance or hang photos of her around the vessel, afraid it might upset the other passengers, and they only searched common areas, not staff or passenger cabins. It was possible that Amy might have fallen overboard, but extremely unlikely because she was a trained lifeguard and experienced avid swimmer. That's when her family recalled how Amy was receiving a lot of special attention from the ship's crew. A waiter had asked Amy out to a restaurant called Carlos and Charlie's during the ship's dock to Aruba. However, Amy had rejected this offer and stated how the crew members gave her the creeps. She wasn't wrong to feel this way, as it just so happens another young American woman had disappeared shortly after being seen at that same restaurant in Aruba. The Bradley family did everything in their power to find Amy, but it was like she vanished completely and all the leads went cold. However, the Bradley family never gave up and were hopeful when multiple people in the Caribbean claimed to have seen their daughter over the years. Just 5 months after her disappearance, 2 Canadian tourists spotted a woman who matched Amy's description on the beach with the exact same tattoos as Amy. These tattoos were pretty specific, such as a Tasmanian devil with a basketball on her shoulder, a sun on her lower back, a lizard on her stomach, and a Chinese symbol on her left ankle. She was accompanied by 2 men, and she tried to say something, but the men gestured her away. One of the tourists believes 100% that it was her. The following year, a woman comes forward saying that she's Amy Lynn Bradley at a brothel in Curacao. Crime Fanatic Friday Part 2, The Girl Who Disappeared from a Cruise Ship. 1 year after Amy Lynn Bradley's disappearance in 1999, a member of the Navy was in a brothel in Curacao when a woman came up to him and told him that she's Amy Lynn Bradley. She begged for his help, but he didn't report it because he didn't want to get in trouble. The officer stayed quiet until after his retirement when he saw Amy's face on People magazine, but by then she was long gone. That same year, the Bradley family gained a tremendous amount of hope when a man named Frank Jones, claiming to be a former U.S. Army Special Forces officer, contacted them. He stated that he knew exactly where Amy was and he could rescue her from the armed Colombians holding her in Curacao. Jones even had a witness statement from a cook who told the family that Amy was being held in a complex protected with barbed wire. The cook described Amy's tattoos and even hummed a lullaby that Amy's mom used to sing to her daughter when she was a baby. However, this all later turned out to be complete fraud. Jones managed to scam the Bradleys out of over $200,000 with his charade of getting their daughter back. It turns out that all the evidence he showed them was made up, leaving the Bradleys back at square one. However, the sightings of Amy didn't stop. In 2005, the Bradleys received an email with a picture of a woman who appeared to be Amy, lying on a bed in her underwear. A member of an organization that locates sex trafficking victims on adult websites noticed the photo and thought it was Amy. She was identified as a woman named Jazz, a sex worker in the Caribbean. Unfortunately, this clue never generated new leads, and to this day, Amy Lynn Bradley remains missing. She continues to be listed on the FBI's most wanted missing persons list. Her family, however, has never given up hope and have offered sizable rewards and information on her whereabouts. I was 24 when I met my SO 23 3 years ago. I never wanted kids, so we always used protection, but I guess shit happens and she ended up giving birth 6 months ago. I told her when she got pregnant that I wouldn't be waking up to do anything with the baby at night because I work. If I had to tune into waking up every time he cried, I'd never get any sleep. So she's been good with being the one waking up at night. Recently I got laid off for winter, and now that I'm home, she's acting like I should be waking up at night to help her. I don't think that's fair because I'll end up with the same problem I stated above. When I go back to work, I can't really afford to lose sleep. Now to the incident at hand. A few nights ago, my son was being particularly fussy at night. I ended up waking up while she was getting his chair. I guess it seemed he'd be up a while. She put him in the bed when she got up, so I scooted closer and cuddled him a bit. Almost looked like he might fall asleep. A few minutes go by and he starts fussing like crazy. I look around the room and my girlfriend is nowhere to be seen. Now I'll admit I did get angry. I was tired and it pissed me off that she just left like that. Sometimes when I get overly frustrated, I lash out at myself. This is where I think I might have been the asshole. I hit myself in the face a few times and said something I probably shouldn't have. My girlfriend came storming back upstairs with the baby monitor in her hand, saying she heard and saw the whole thing and that I was unbelievable. I spat at her that she wouldn't know what it's like to need sleep when you work because she's never worked hard a day in her life. She's never worked as hard as I do in my current job, but we did work 2 other places together before she got pregnant, but she hasn't worked in a little over a year. I think what I said was warranted. Anyway, she said she's not even sure if she wants to be with me anymore and has been giving me the silent treatment for 3 days, even though I said I was sorry. I don't want her to make my son a fatherless child. Am I the asshole for telling my SO she's never worked hard? So my boyfriend, Kyle, 26, recently got a promotion to general manager at a restaurant he works at. I, 22, work full-time as a pediatric nurse and my hours are kind of all over the place right now because of the virus. Anyway, when he got home to tell me about his promotion, I was ecstatic. He's a hard worker and deserves it 100%. However, because it happened on a Tuesday, we decided we'll go for celebratory dinner with our mutual friends Saturday night. I was scheduled to work Saturday, but I figured as long as I was able to get home, shower, and change, all is well. I'll just sleep late on Sunday. So now it's Saturday. I unfortunately lost a patient who had been fighting for her life since birth. I've been her nurse every time I was working in that department, and her family were very important to me. I was absolutely devastated. When I got home, the last thing on my mind was dinner. I told Kyle about what happened and he gave me a hug and said he's sorry to hear that. About 10 minutes later, he softly asked if I was going to shower before we leave. I told him I really don't feel like going out, but he insisted that I go since I promised, and if he goes without me, his friends will ask a lot of questions. I didn't want to, but I agreed since I promised. While I tried to keep a smile on my face, it was obvious that I was upset. One of our friends asked if I was okay, and before I could just say that I had a rough day at work, Kyle said, "She's been bitching about a patient she lost at work today," and scoffed. I was flabbergasted. He's never said anything like that before. I replied saying, "That patient was 3 months old." He shrugged and said it's not my own child and it shouldn't bother me this much. I was furious and embarrassed since it went down in front of our friends, so I just put down enough money for my meal and went home. I put his stuff in a box. He wasn't living with me, but would stay with me a couple days out of the week. When he came back, he flipped out and I said that I just need space. That was 2 weeks ago. I have since changed the lock since he had a spare key. He says I'm overreacting and that I'm the asshole for ruining his big night, that I selfishly made it all about me. He accused me of thinking higher of myself because I'm a nurse and he works in a restaurant. Honestly, I don't know where that came from. He also said that he figured since it was a celebratory dinner for him, he thought I was going to pay, so walking out on him was very embarrassing because he didn't bring his wallet. One of our mutual friends, Amy, called me and said that while what Kyle said was fucked up, that me leaving like that was unnecessary and made the whole night awkward. I feel bad for ruining the night for everyone else, but I just couldn't let him get away with that. I'm very proud to be a nurse and I don't want anyone, especially my partner, to talk poorly about it. So am I the asshole for walking out on dinner? As a child, whenever I was invited to people's houses, my mom told me it was etiquette to eat the food that they made. She would always tell me to put a considerable amount and eat all of it since it would be rude not to. First, she said I would be wasting food, and second, it would seem as if I didn't enjoy the food, which is mean since a lot of effort was put into making it. I've always followed this rule and thought it was true. If I cooked a buttload of food and no one ate it, I'd be heartbroken. My boyfriend of 7 months invited me to his family's Christmas dinner. I've met his parents very briefly, but nothing too formal. Anyway, we get to the food and I was pretty hungry and everything looked really amazing. I made sure to fill my plate, but not overfill, just equal amounts of everything on the table. I ate it all and to be honest, was pretty stuffed. His mother then asked me if I wanted seconds. There was still a lot of food on the table. I took her up on the offer and put a bit more of the pasta salad. My boyfriend gave me a strange look, but I thought nothing of it at the time. Dessert comes and I chose to eat a slice of cheesecake. We then had coffee, all sitting around the fire and telling funny stories. Everyone seemed like in a very good mood and everything was great. After everything, I was honestly so happy because I was worried about dinner and meeting his parents, but I thought that everything went well. We left his parents' house in separate cars as I came directly from my parents' house to him. We reached my apartment and I can tell he's totally pissed off. I asked him what was wrong and he just blew up in my face that I had no manners, telling me he had never seen me eat as much as I did at his parents' house and it was so embarrassing. After further prying, he said that in his culture, when you eat a lot at a person's house, it's disrespectful because you should never go to a house on an empty stomach. He said that it makes a person look desperate and fat. He said on the car ride home, his mom was talking about how embarrassing and unmannered I was to eat so much. I told him that she told me to put seconds and he said that's done to be a good hostess, but a guest should never take up on that offer. He said it would have been fine if I had declined dessert, but since I didn't, I looked even more fat. I explained my reasoning to him and he called that bullshit. I honestly feel terrible, but I told him that if he explained to me beforehand, I wouldn't have eaten so much. He said that he thought it was common knowledge. It's been 2 days and neither of us will really talk until the other apologizes. I know it's petty not to apologize, but I sincerely don't think I did anything wrong. Am I the asshole for eating at my boyfriend's family's Christmas dinner? While on vacation in a city 8 hours away from home with my girlfriend, we get into a small argument, and this resulted in me leaving her stranded in a downtown area in the middle of the night. I walked back to the hotel 20 minutes nearby to cool off, thinking my girlfriend would eventually make her way back soon after. However, after 2 hours, my girlfriend was escorted back by police. Turned out, her phone was on low battery, leading her to not be able to look up directions on the way back or call for an Uber. She ended up getting lost for an hour and had to later borrow a stranger's phone to call the cops for help. I felt pretty horrible leaving her there. However, given that my girlfriend is already a full functioning adult, I didn't consider the possibility of her phone being dead. She does have a bad habit of forgetting to charge her phone. I threw her a Metro card and stormed away. She ended up overreacting to the whole situation, claiming that I abused her, packing her belongings and calling her sister on the phone to tell her about what I did. Her sister ended up blowing up my phone, calling me cruel and abusive. Mind you, I only left thinking that she'd be able to get home easily. Even though it was a couple hours past midnight, the city was still crowded with people, probably not dangerous like she exaggerated. When my girlfriend was still crying to her sister, she lied and said that she's now feared for her life, possibly implying that I threatened her. In the heat of the moment, I snatched the phone out of her hands to talk to her sister myself. She suddenly screamed to the top of her lungs, another overreaction, took her belongings and ran out of the hotel. I chased her down, but she told me that she had already booked a flight home in the early morning and never wanted to see me again. She kept saying that I hit her when all I did was try to explain myself. Her evidence being the very tiny nail mark I left on her face when she was trying to resist, snatching her phone back and didn't let me talk to her sister. 2 hours later, a police officer knocked on my hotel room as I realized that my girlfriend had gone to the police station and reported me for domestic violence. I gave my statement and they advised me to stop contacting her for the night. I didn't want this incident to ruin my hard-earned vacation, so I decided to stay for the rest of the trip like I had initially planned. After I got back, I tried calling her sister and her mom and they refused to hear my explanation. Her mom even told me that they're still being interviewed by the police to follow up on the domestic violence report. I heard her sister telling me over the phone that I will pay my price. What could that be? My parents are undocumented. Now I'm paranoid that her family, knowing this information, would call the anonymous tip line on my parents. Am I the asshole for getting into a small argument with my girlfriend and then leaving her stranded? Storytime about when I accidentally submitted hardcore furry erotica instead of my final paper. So I'm currently a 4th-year computer science student at a pretty respected university and was looking to graduate this semester. One of the classes I was taking was a class in modern advancements and trends in the field of technology. While the class didn't require much heavy lifting, it was still a higher level one and required a good amount of work. For our final, our professor had assigned us a 20-page research paper into a current or possible future technology of our choice within the field. I did my paper on helium-3 power generation. I worked my ass off on this paper and in the end was super proud of it. The papers were due last night at midnight and I held off on submitting my final draft till the end because I wanted to get it as clean as possible. This is where I fucked up big time. Let me tell you a little about myself. I don't work a normal job. I tried it in my first year of school and I really didn't like it. I've worked internships when they come, but outside of that, I didn't really work. This and being a student really doesn't mix well though. For the past 3 years, I've gone by on writing hardcore erotica on commission, specifically for furries. I would write anything. Any fetish, any premise, anything. In some parts of that community, I became really popular. At one point, I was making almost $2,500 on Patreon along with the amounts I charged to my customers. Am I proud of this? No. I have written some really disgusting stuff, but it paid the bills and the money was too good to pass up. I told myself the minute I got a real job, I was cutting and running from this work. Well, this brings us to last night. I had not gotten any sleep for the past few nights. I had multiple projects due in the span of a few days. I was running on nothing but coffee and Rockstar. I was nothing more than a walking corpse and wanted to do nothing but sleep. I ended up doing my last read over of my final paper and submitted it before sleeping. However, instead of submitting my final paper, I somehow submitted one of the commissions I was working on. This commission is not light either. It's almost 10 pages long and contains a variety of things including vor and scat. So I went to bed. Submissions for the final locked and my academic career was sentenced to death then and there. When I woke up this morning, I checked my grades for my other classes before noticing an email from my professor. All it says was to come to his office after class today. I want to fucking die right now. I don't know how I'm going to explain why instead of my final, I submitted a hardcore erotic story with a wolfman jacking off in a dragon's stomach. But yeah, I fucked up big time. My girlfriend comes from a wealthy background and grew up with maids, chefs, chauffeurs, etc. I was raised in a completely opposite environment and still adjusting to dating someone like her. When we were not with her parents, we spent a lot of time at one of her apartments. Here's the issue. My girlfriend likes to walk around home barely wearing anything, which is fine. Awesome even. But she does this even when the help are around. For example, last month her family hired a new driver for her. He stopped by the apartment to introduce himself. She was only wearing underwear. Keep in mind, this is the first time they've met in person. I felt awkward. He was visibly awkward and she didn't give a shit at all. She was casually chatting to him while scrolling away on her phone. She does this all the time. She doesn't think that she needs to wear any decent amount of clothes at all when people that work for her are around. She will casually walk around wearing just a thong or a tiny crop top. Just a crop top, nothing else. She even does this with complete strangers. One time she opened the door for the delivery guy wearing only a see-through gown. You could see everything. Afterwards, I talked to her about it and she was utterly confused as to why I felt uncomfortable. Then she laughed and told me to stop being a jealous baby. She even said that I'm being unreasonable. We had another discussion about this yesterday and I told her that she probably wouldn't feel comfortable if I did the same. She said that she doesn't understand why I care what her staff think and that it never even crossed her mind that this is inappropriate. She told me that she only does this in the comfort of her own home and not in front of actual people. So she doesn't consider the people that work for her actual people. She got kind of mad at me and vented to her friends. According to all of them, I'm weird for having a problem with this and an asshole for telling my girlfriend to cover up. Somehow, I'm the villain of this story. Am I the asshole for telling my girlfriend to cover up her body when strangers enter the home? I'm a stay-at-home mom and my husband works full-time. We have 3 kids and one of them is 2 years old. My husband helps a lot with the kids. He's a committed dad but is absolutely against babysitters due to an awful incident with a babysitter that was the reason his younger male cousin James got disabled years ago. I don't go out much since I have to take the kids with me and not every place is suitable for kids. We received an invitation from our brothers, who has been my husband's best friend since college, wedding, which we later discovered was child-free. My brother lives states away, so the entire trip will take 4 days, as well as my brother's in-laws' weekend dinner party. I told my husband that I want to go since it's been a while since I went to a wedding, and this one is special and suggested that we get a trusted friend as a babysitter. He asked if I was serious to consider leaving our 2-year-old with a babysitter and suggested that I do what I normally do and stay home with the kids while he goes to the wedding. I refused and said I have as much right to attend as him since we were both invited. He said it wasn't his fault that my brother wants a child-free wedding and I should do this for the kids and sacrifice for their sake. I still refused and said it was unfair, and since he's the parent too, then he should stay also for the kids. He looked at me and said, That's my best friend's wedding you're asking me to skip for Christ's sake. Are you kidding me? Then said I was being petty for suggesting this and I was basically choosing to go to a party over keeping our kids safe. He asked me to consider this a business trip, what I would do. Go with him and leave the kids? I said I understand his paranoia of babysitters, but really, all my friends have sitters and at times they're really needed. He said I ought to know better than what my friends tell me and this wasn't even up for discussion. When I kept arguing, he called me selfish and said he won't let me ruin this relationship with his friend because I was being spiteful for not being able to attend and that my brother will understand my situation. He keeps asking who's more important, a wedding party or my kids, and said I was being unreasonable for making my attendance a hill to die on. Am I the asshole for refusing to stay home with the kids while my husband attends my brother's wedding? I'm 34 and my brother 29 got married a few years ago to literally the sweetest woman, 28, in the world. A year or so ago, she was in a car accident and suffered a traumatic brain injury. She's never been quite the same. Her voice is always shaky and she stutters a lot. She can be a bit slow to process things. She needed to relearn basic tasks, just issues like that. Well, they were over at Thanksgiving and it must have been a particularly hard day for her, maybe because she was overwhelmed or something and it was difficult talking to her. Like I asked her if she wanted something to drink and she stared at me for a moment and it wasn't until my brother came and crouched down and asked her what she wanted to drink that she answered. She wanted apple juice. We didn't have any apple juice so my brother walked all the way down to the gas station to get her a bottle instead of just saying no, have water. My brother dished out her plate and when dinner was over, she volunteered to do the dishes and my brother helped too. The rest of the family went to chat in the living room and when I came to refill my glass of wine, I watched while they laughed and danced and acted like they used to. He seemed so happy doing that and less happy when he had to help her. It's just hard having to wait on her. Like we were playing some board games and she wanted to play too and so my brother had to sit there and help explain things to her. Her turns took like 10 times as long as anyone else's. When they were leaving, I was talking to my brother and I asked if he thought about getting a divorce at all and he instantly answered no and was insulted that I had asked. He's a young, good-looking guy with a good job. My sister-in-law can't do anything and she's essentially a child that he has to look after. He adjusts his work schedule to take her to her speech, occupational, physical, and regular therapy. Then he's essentially a nurse with all the work he does with her prescriptions. Aside from that, she's not working and can't do much around the house. She cleans, watches the news, and helps make desserts for funerals at her church. He even got her a dog to help keep her active. He claims she's getting better and she seems to, but she'll never be the person she was before. Am I the asshole for asking my brother to consider divorcing his wife? Story time about when I lost my virginity to a water slide. So, do you guys know those water slides that you stand in and then they suddenly drop you straight down onto the water slide? If not, look them up on YouTube. There's nothing like them. Ah, yes, the sweet memories of my first time on one of these. I feel that my mental and emotional scars have healed enough to tell this gem. At the time, my girlfriend, now fiance, worked as a photographer for one of those resorts with the indoor and outdoor water parks. One of her perks was that her and a family member or friend could get into the water park for free. So one hot summer day she had off, we both decided it'd be fun to go there and cool down for the day. While we were there, I discovered one of their most thrilling looking water slides. Basically, you stand in this tube and then the slide operator presses a button and the slide drops you straight down like 90 feet before you actually start going down the water slide. Me, being a thrill seeker, of course, had to try it. So I made a great climb up to the top of the slide, stood in line, and finally it was my turn. Once I got in the tube, the operator told me to keep my legs crossed. Now I'm a pretty big, heavy guy, so I was like, that's uncomfortable as fuck. I'm not doing that. So there I was, standing in the tube, having a panic attack from anticipation, with my legs not crossed. The operator finally presses the button and the bottom opens and I fall straight down the water slide. Very quickly I realized why they have you cross your legs. Water shot so far far up my ass so fast I swear I tasted it in my mouth. My body raced down that slide as I questioned every life choice I had ever made. Once I made it down to the bottom, I sat there for a moment, absolutely violated. I felt like someone in an old episode of Law & Order, Special Victims Unit. I built up the courage to finally stand up, and all I could feel was a nice warm stream of water mixed with shit and maybe a little bit of blood shoot out of my ass faster than a steamboat geyser at Yellowstone National Park. I quickly got off the slide and ran to the bathroom with a trail of shitty water tailing me as the slide operator stared in awe. They had to shut down the slide for the rest of the day, but man was my asshole clean after that.